Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lotcast. My name is Geoff. I'm your host today, and we're going to be talking about some of our favorite movies in August. We'll also be talking about some of our least favorite films from the month and some unexpected films as well. I have a couple guests today to talk about that. My first guest is Elaina.
Hello.
Hello, Elaina. We have Matt.
Hello.
Hey, Matt. And we have Nicky.
Hello.
Thanks for joining, everybody. So let's just get right into it. Let's talk about some of our favorite films that we saw in the month of August. Matt, how about we start with you?
Well, I'll say my favourite film I saw in August was Memoria, and which is obviously directed by Apichatpong Weerasethakul, and it's kind of a hard. Plot-wise, it's a hard film to describe because, and all his films are kind of like that. But essentially, it's about a woman who lives in Colombia who keeps hearing a loud booming noise in her sleep and tries to find out what it is. And I think Weerasethakul is one of the most, in my opinion, he's one of the most important living directors because he's so philosophical and almost transcendental in many ways. And I think there's very few directors who hit those kind of beats nowadays. And Memoria is no exception to this kind of vibe. It's just an absolutely fascinating journey of like self exploration and memory and culture.
Yeah,
And
I
it,
agree.
it highlights his strength because many directors can lose their touch when they leave their like native country, and his previous films have drawn a lot from Thai spirituality and religion, but it proves that he can make interesting films without like a Thai setting.
hmm Yeah, he's a pretty prolific director, and he's one of my favorites. I would say as well. I've seen, I think, just about everything he's made at this point, except for a couple shorts. But I love his films. They're so like there's always a spiritual experience about his stuff.
Yeah, I think I just watched this one in August as well, and I knew someone else was going to probably talk about it, and I'm still kind of waiting to see it in a theater to really know how I feel about it, because especially since it's about this like loud booming noise, I think I need to really like feel the boom of that noise. But this is the first film by him that I've like really, really enjoyed. I think I've seen two of his others before. And I don't want to say too much about the film, but I also agree with the whole point about like spirituality. And I feel like his films kind of look into like another dimension, or they connect with something that's like not of this world. And it's not really like a dreamscape or something of that sort. It's I think spiritual is the best word for it, but I really liked how Memoria felt like it was communicating with something else that we can't really understand, and I think that makes his work very special in how he approaches things.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Matt. How about another movie that you really enjoyed?
I also saw this month I saw Wagon Master by John Ford, which I really enjoyed, which is about a group of Mormons who basically go on this wagon trail and head out to start a new town in the desert. And
hmm
over the last 6 months or so, I've really enjoyed exploring John Ford's filmography. And Wagon Master is this very like quintessential, stereotypical Ford. It contains like all of his trademarks, both technical and theme wise. And he loves to explore like the nature of civilization and how community arises. And I think Wagon Master is just this really great and really fascinating look at how a community forms out of nothing.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a huge fan of Ford as well. I have not seen Wagon Master yet, though. It's been on my list to see. How would you put it up against like something like Stagecoach?
I think in many ways it's a much more mature work than Stagecoach because as good as Stagecoach is, it's like I think something that always gets brought up against Ford is his depiction of the Native Americans in his movies,
hmm
and Stagecoach is one of the worst offenders for this. As good a movie as it is, but Wagon Master is much more mature, and it paints the Native Americans, which the Mormons encounter, in a much more sympathetic and sort of like showing them as actual citizens instead of just mindless adversaries. So I think
hmm
in I wouldn't say it's a better film, but I say it's a far more mature film than something like Stagecoach.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Stagecoach was like what 39, so
Yeah,
he's got
39.
plenty.
Wagon Master was 1950, I think.
Yeah, so he's a lot of time to mature at
And
that point.
I also saw Another Western I saw this month that I really enjoyed was Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid,
Mm-hmm.
which was my first Sam Peckinpah movie I watched. I really
Oh,
enjoyed it. I really got a kick out of that one.
that's
And it's
great.
about the newly appointed sheriff who has to hunt down, basically kill his old friend. I think I really loved the way Peckinpah's West is contrast to Ford's like view of the Old West, because Ford is very romanticizes it, whereas Peckinpah's West is just sort of dusty, blood-soaked setting for violence and greed. And the film itself has a really nice anti-capitalist tilt to it, because Pat Garrett does what he does at the best of like very wealthy, very corrupt cattle ranchers and landowners. I think it's just a really interesting angle to explore.
Yeah, agreed. Sam Peckinpah is such a intense director. I've seen a couple of his films, and Pat Bear and the, Billy the Kid is pretty violent, in particular. Um, it's kind of like the movie's kind of like a weird like vignette, almost though,
Yeah,
where it's kind of like just a weird. You just see experiences of the characters rather than like some overarching storyline. Peckinpah is definitely someone who's getting kind of a look at, or like just a little more notice recently, at least for me. I know a lot of his name's in a lot more discussions as of late, which is good to see. Who did we decide wanted to go next?
I'll go. So I had 3 films that I picked out as my favorite of last month. The first one is Maya Deren's At Land. I'd seen Meshes of the Afternoon before and decided last month to delve into her other 40s work. And At Land was the first one I watched. And it is sort of a companion piece to Meshes, where it's a bit more wild. It takes place mostly in the outdoors, where she's chasing this chess piece through all of these different environments. And it's really, really interesting if you're into this abstract sort of experimental type of film. The other that I saw last month was After Blue, A Dirty Paradise by Bertrand Mandico. It's his new one, second feature film. He did also The Wild Boys in 2017. And that is about a girl, an outcast on this faraway planet, who finds this criminal that has been buried in the sand, and she frees the criminal, and turns out she's this like psychopath. And she and her mother are cast out by the city, and they go, you've made this mess. You've got to track this woman down and kill her. And the woman's name is, for some reason, Kate Bush, like the singer Kate Bush. And
Oh,
so they have to, it's like this acid Western sci-fi adventure story where they have to go through this really weird landscape into the wilderness to track down and kill Kate Bush. It's really,
wow.
really interesting, really weird.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies from last year that I watched for the 2021 list that we just did. The third movie that I watched, which was also for the 2021 list, was Boss Level by Joe Carnahan. Now, I didn't know who Joe Carnahan was prior to watching this movie. I just saw this movie, which is pretty much a time loop movie about this retired Marine who he just keeps waking up every time he dies in the same day, sort of an Edge of Tomorrow type of situation. And I thought, that's classic. That's a classic plot. That'll be fun, at least. But
Mhm.
I ended up really, really liking it and really enjoying it. It was strangely emotional, which is not what I was expecting from this seemingly dumb action flick.
Right.
But it's got a really good plot, really like cleverly written, which again was surprising because I basically, when I looked this guy up, just saw he made these like crazy action movies that seem like movies that you'd see in a movie, like a character would be watching, like
Right.
dudes from hell fight, I don't know, Argentina, the whole country. But yeah, it was actually quite good and had a really good ending, really kind of sort of ambiguous ending that I thought was really interesting. So that
That's
was a good
great.
movie. It was pretty
Awesome.
kind of all over the place in terms of like types of good movies that I saw last month.
Yeah,
So
you got a crazy varied list there. Well, I'm a huge. I'm not gonna say I'm a huge fan of Maya Deren because I've only seen two, but I've seen Meshes and
Which two have you
Outland.
seen? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and Outland was incredible. I was, in particular, quite blown away by that. It was I just how inventive it was, especially for the '40s, in particular.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that
for
was
sure.
insane. Yeah, definitely suggest that for everybody if you're into that kind of experimental cinema.
Yeah, Maya Deren and Kenneth Anger are both two that
Hmm.
I've found very, very like ahead of their time as far as experimental films go, and film just in general for the 40s.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, was it the guy who did Boss Level? Oh, he made an 18 movie.
He made the A Team. Yeah, he made the
Okay.
2010 A Team movie, and he made a movie, I think, also from last year, maybe a couple years earlier, that I also watched last month called Smoking Aces. Smoking Aces,
Mm.
which is also quite good. Not quite as good as Boss Level, but still, it's good if you're into like action movies that are actually like quite fun and sort of silly, but also pretty well written, pretty like tight plots.
Hmm.
He's uh, surprisingly talented.
Yeah, well, perfect. That's good. Everyone needs a good action movie like that. Okay, how about you, Elena? How about some of your favorites?
All right, so this month I was mostly watching 1940s movies for our upcoming 1940s list and also 2021 movies for our most recent list. But I decided to pick two 1940s movies as my best movies for the month. One of my other best movies of the month was The Big Parade, which I didn't want to discuss again because we already talked about it on the Silent Film podcast. If you haven't already listened to that one, that's where I talk about The Big Parade. Um, but one of them that I really enjoyed was Brief Encounter, which I know is like a very classic pick. Not really that surprising that I thought it was very good. Um, but if you haven't seen it, it's just basically about this woman who she's married, she like has a seemingly like perfect life with like a husband and kids, and she falls in love with another man and they have this very like quick romance. It's just kind of a very like classic plot, but the way it's done is it's very tight, it's very um, just like streamlined. The structure of it works wonderfully. I think that the way that the whole film tied together at the end was like really spectacular for me. It was just like all around like perfect movie watching experience. I understand why it's one of like the greats of all time. So really great, um, really great film, Brief Encounter.
Yeah. David
Um,
Lean's pretty amazing director.
yeah, it's
It's
just
quite shocking.
yeah, it's just really great. So not that surprising, but the 1940s are kind of a blind spot for me, and it's a British film. The other one also happens to be a British film, but I don't know, like British and
Right.
American films, especially of that time, are a bit of a blind spot for me that I'm trying to fill in because I've seen a lot from the 20s and a lot from the 50s and 60s, but 30s and 40s not so much. So the other 1940s movie that I saw in August that I really liked was A Matter of Life and Death, which I know is also very highly regarded. um, it's by um, Powell and
Pressburger.
Pressburger, yeah, and they made a whole bunch of films in the 40s, all of which are pretty good, very good. um, they're very well regarded, but this one was my favorite that I've seen so far, and it's I didn't expect it to be so funny. Usually, things that are quite humorous are like they don't land so well with me, but I thought this film was like pretty hilarious, but still like quite emotional and very sweet. But it's like a World War II pilot who falls out of his plane and he's like supposed to die, but like they make a mistake and the people from the afterlife make a mistake and he doesn't actually die, and in the time that they're sorting out their error he ends up falling in love with like an American girl. So it's just kind of about like them arguing that like it's your mess up, and I should have like that I lived, and now I'm in love, and I can't die now. It's just very funny. It's very sweet. It's very charming, and the way that it's done visually is really great. Because I like that its depiction of the afterlife isn't so much like, scary or dreamy or like heaven like. It's just the world on Earth is very luscious in this film. It's very like colorful and like um intense in its like vibrancy. And then like death is just devoid of color. It's just has none of the joys of life. And I really like that particular depiction of life and death. I thought it was like quite original, and really kind of added to the whole plot of the film. Just it was very good. I thought it was very charming. I really enjoyed it. So those I think were my two best films that I saw in August. Although I did really like The Big Parade as well, so you can hear me talk about The Big Parade elsewhere.
There you go. Have you seen other Pressburger and
Yeah,
movies?
I watched Black Narcissus, which
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like quite as much. It's like still very visually amazing. I just didn't quite appeal to me as much. And then I think last week I watched The Red Shoes, which I thought was also pretty good, but I think A Matter of Life and Death is like my favorite out of the three for sure. So
It's interesting to hear you say that about Black Narcissus, because I've heard sort of the same thing, is that it's really, really beautiful. It's really visually stunning, but there's not a lot more to it than that. It's not super memorable outside of that. So I'm definitely planning on watching that this month for the 40s list preparation. And I'm interested to see if my opinion lines up with yours and others that I've heard. Because it looks really good, but, I have that wariness now.
Well, I like Black Narcissus. It's a good movie. I don't think anyone will be disappointed by watching that.
I think the thing with Black Narcissus is it goes to some very interesting places that are a bit unexpected, and I don't want to like give too much away, but I think that it felt like a bit dated to me maybe, or not quite like in line with my, I hate this phrase, but like in line with my sensibilities. It's it's like just has a few moments that I just like I didn't quite vibe with, but it is quite interesting in where it goes narratively, I guess, or
Mm-hmm.
in with regards to what your expectations are. It is. I still thought it was good. It just wasn't up there with. I think I'd place The Red Shoes second, and then of course A Matter of Life and Death first. But I am
Yeah.
still very excited to see their other stuff because all of them have been good experiences so far, even if I didn't like them all equally.
Yeah, I think my favorite besides Red Shoes is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. That one is pretty incredible. Pretty incredible watch. So definitely suggest that to be your next one. Okay, so I'll talk about the movies that I thought were the best that I saw this month. I watched a movie called Velvet Goldmine from 1998, directed by Todd Haynes. It's it's about these glam rock stars and their force in the industry. It's kind of set up like Citizen Kane, story wise, where you're unraveling this mystery about this interesting rock star and his life and all these things. I don't want to go super into the story because the movie is it's kind of all over the place story wise. It's an experience movie. Like it's gorgeously made. It's supremely gay, and just really in your face and fun. And the soundtrack is just it's so good.
Yeah, Velvet Goldmine is one of those movies I've had in my watch list for a really long time. Todd Haynes in general is a director that I've been meaning to like look into at some point, but I've
Hmm.
just not gotten around to it. And yeah, it's really good to hear, a glowing review of that. I'm glad you really enjoyed it. So that might be pushed up a bit in terms of priority.
Yeah, it's pretty great, and it's got Ewan McGregor and Christian Bale doing a lot of fun gay stuff together, which is always nice to see.
We
Everyone
all
likes that.
need to see more of them doing fun gay stuff together.
Yes, exactly. So I was very happy with that one. The other movie that I saw that I really enjoyed was Comrades from 1986, directed by Bill Douglas. So Matt actually was the one who got me into Bill Douglas. So thank you, Matt. It's
No
been a
problem.
wonderful experience. But Comrades is this epic film kind of about the Tolpuddle martyrs, who were like these English farmers who formed like the first trade union and tried to get their first like fair wages for the hard work they're doing. But the movie itself is kind of sparse on actual plot. I would say it's not. It's all about the characters and who they are and what they're trying to do. So it's not so much about the movement; it's about the people in the movement for the most part. Like I don't know if any of you have seen Mike Leigh's newest-ish movie, Peterloo. I kind of put it like that. It's a little more slow version of Peterloo.
I think the goal of Comrades from Douglas was because so much of the films about people who lived in poverty or things like that it's just like poverty porn, and all they do is just depict their suffering. And whereas Douglas's goal was to humanize and feel the working class was nothing but dignity and pride, and I think that's what makes Comrades such a beautiful film, because he focuses purely on their humanity and their dignity rather than the suffering that they endured.
Agree. It's really a beautiful film. It's wonderfully made from top to bottom, and the performances are quite stellar as well. There's Alex Norton plays as like this lanternist in the movie, where he plays a bunch of different characters throughout the film, but it's kind of like this narrative tool to like help bring and just show passage of time and technology. It was really quite ingenious. So if you're a fan of good long 3 hour movies about interesting people, definitely suggest Comrades.
There's a certain, because I rewatched it, I think the month before last, and there's a certain bittersweetness to it because it was Bill Douglas's last film, and there is a certain thing like, because he died in his early 50s and he died so young. There's a certain bittersweetness of what he could have made if he'd have lived a longer life.
Definitely, I think we would have gotten quite the career out of him for
Yeah.
sure. Because his trilogy before this as well is really wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about the worst movies that we saw this month. Let's start with you, Matt. What was some of the worst things that you saw?
It wasn't too bad a month, honestly, but I think there's two films we're going to talk about. One was a film that came out just a couple of months ago called Not Okay, which is about a woman who fakes a trip to Paris, and then there's like a terror attack in Paris, and she has to like keep the lie that she was there. I think it's just it's a lot of missed potential, because it started off relatively fun, but then it decided to take itself way too seriously and become this very bland political think piece. And I think it's a lot smarter than it actually is. I think it would have been way more fun and way better if it just leaned fully into its satirical nature. It's sort of just in this limbo between something very serious and something very silly. So you have characters who are caricatures, like interacting with like completely serious, very somber characters. It just doesn't really gel or work together very well. And then
so just kind of disappointing.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment. It's not atrocious. It's just it needed to either lean into one or the other. It's kind of just stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
And then the other film is an obscure action film called Security, which is about a security guard who has to protect like a little girl who's been chased by mercenaries in a shopping mall. I'm like a big fan of well shot and well done action films, but this just wasn't one of those. It was very bland, very cheap looking. And there's a lot of weird things about it. Like there's an actor in this who is a member of like a Chinese or Taiwanese boy band who's only in it to try and market to that region.
Okay.
And his acting is just horrendous in this film. And then the child acting is just, from like the little girl who's being chased, is just pretty shambolic as well. It does like pretty fun Home Alone style, like mall kills with like tools in the shopping mall and stuff. If you want that, just go and watch like the end of The Equalizer, and you have a better time.
Oh, there you go. Let's do that.
Yeah, well, I do like The Equalizer. That's a good film.
The Equalizer, both of them are good movies.
Yeah.
Solid action flicks. Not amazing, but
enjoyable.
Yeah.
Have a good time. Okay, how about you, Nikki? What were some of the worst that you saw?
So I had also a pretty decent month. There's 3 that I would say are in my bottom 3 for the month. The first would be Man of Steel by Zack Snyder. I went to... No, I don't think I had seen it before. I wanted to watch the Snyder Cut Justice League for the 2021 list. Didn't end up getting around to it because I watched Man of Steel in preparation. I was going to watch that and the Batman versus Superman movie. And I watched Man of Steel and I thought, God, this is so long and so boring and so stupid and badly written that I didn't even finish it. I thought that it wasn't badly made, and there was some interesting set design pieces and like visuals that he had going on, and he's not like terrible. He's got good ideas, but I think it just didn't really come together, and he tried to make Superman too sort of mean-spirited and nihilistic. The scene with, man, I don't know if this is a spoiler. His dad dies. If that's a spoiler, then I'm sorry. But okay. The way it was portrayed felt very sort of cruel and pointless. I get that his dad had to die for some character development, but the way it was handled in the film I thought was sort of tasteless. And
yeah, it's just a giant tornado, right? I think that just
it's a giant tornado. It doesn't make any sense. He could have easily saved his dad, but he just doesn't, for basically no reason other than to give the character grief. And it's very not to be that guy, but in the comics, he dies. He dies from a heart attack, and the whole point of that thematically is Superman can do all this stuff. He can save people from all this stuff, but he can't save his dad from something that is like medical going on inside of him.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense for his character arc, whereas this just seemed just needlessly silly.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a big fan of that movie, but that's okay. Zack Snyder is still cool. I do like his ideas and his execution.
I really liked Sucker Punch. I rewatched Sucker Punch earlier this year, maybe at the end of last year, and had a really good time with it. I know that that's sort of a controversial one. So a lot of people hate it, but maybe they should critically reevaluate it, like they did with Sam Peckinpah. Maybe these are the same things.
I can get behind that. Sure.
The second one that I want to talk about was Prey, the new Predator movie that just came out. I sort of went back and forth on whether or not I was going to watch it because I'm very wary of new installations in long-running franchises like this, like the Predator series. I think there's a new Alien movie coming out next year, or maybe at the end of this year. But I thought, why not? It's a Predator movie. Maybe it'll be fun at least. And I was really disappointed. I thought it was really, just like not very exciting, not very interesting. I thought the action wasn't filmed very well at all. It looks like a YouTube video / Assassin's Creed cutscene in a lot of scenes. Really strange. And
I can see that.
I just thought that the Predator's powers were sort of went all over the place. Sometimes he was really, really strong and overpowered, and then other times he was just taking damage like nobody's business. And it just wasn't consistent, didn't make a lot of sense. Which I know it's a Predator movie. They're not like high art cinema, but it was enough to sort of annoy me. And I didn't hate it, but I don't know. I guess
it's
I don't know what I
wanted.
expected. Because again, I wasn't gonna watch it anyways, but I figured why not? Watch it with some friends and meh. And then the third one is Taken 2. Now, I rewatched Taken. That was fine. That held up pretty well. Taken 2, I knew was going to be bad because the description of Taken 2 is Liam Neeson and his wife get taken, and the daughter has to save them.
Oh.
That makes about as much sense as it sounds like it would. It is ridiculous. It's very silly. All of the character development that they went through in the first one, where she's like, they've all gone through this traumatic event. That's all erased at the beginning of Taken 2. She's still like, oh my God, Dad, why won't you let me go to Turkey by myself? Like, it
Yeah, don't
doesn't
mind
make
the
any
first movie.
sense. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. She's got no lasting psychological problems from being sex trafficked.
Right.
And it's just silly. So it's just a silly movie.
Yeah.
Are you going to watch Taken 3 where they have to edit 50 cuts of Liam Neeson jumping over the fence?
Well, I'm going to have to, I guess. I'm invested at this point. I'm interested because Taken 3 apparently has very little connection to the first two Taken movies. Apparently it's about how Liam Neeson gets targeted by a serial killer, or they think he's a serial killer or something like that. It has nothing to do with the Albanians at all. I'm just curious to see how they wrap that up. I know it's going to be bad, but
Yeah,
you got to see
not
it through to
great.
the end.
Gotta commit if you're all the way there. Might as well.
Exactly.
All I really remember from Taken 2 was just how sickening it was. Not like in content, but just how it was filmed. Like, there's so much shaky cam in that movie. I remember getting really
Yeah.
sick seeing it in theaters. It was the same with, like, what's that movie, Hardcore Henry? I think that movie makes me physically ill to watch.
Oh, I
I
never
can't do it.
finished that movie. I couldn't finish that movie because I just hated the shaky cam point of view thing. I
Yeah.
appreciate it as a gimmick, but
Yeah,
I
same.
hate it aesthetically.
Same here. It's just awful to watch. I can't do it. Okay, Elaina, how about you? What were some of the worst things that you saw?
I didn't really see anything bad this month, which is good. Usually I have something that I hated in the month, but I didn't actually give anything lower than a 6, so we were doing pretty well. But I have two films that I thought were disappointing, and that I wished for a little bit more from them. The first one is actually Tokyo Drifter from the 60s. I know it seems like
Okay.
a strange pick for my worst. It wasn't bad. It just is like not for me, and I found it disappointing. I found like both Suzuki films that I watched quite disappointing on the whole. I think it's because I find that they're very stylistically strong and visually strong, but the plots confuse me. I just don't like the like yakuza like gangster stuff, and the shootouts. I just don't. It's just not what I like. And so I watched Tokyo Drifter as just like a quick little watch, over lunch. And I forgot that I watched it. I entirely forgot that I had seen it. It's very also like, it reminds me his works remind me a lot of like French New Wave and how they're very like jazzy and free flowing. I appreciate them like as a concept, especially because I think of all the like Japanese directors of that era, he feels like the most in touch with that other movement, which I think is really interesting. I just don't care for the plots like at all. Like I just really do not care. Which is like just a personal taste thing. I've just been disappointed in both that I saw. I will say Tokyo Drifter has like a really cool theme song though. I really like the integration of the theme song. The theme song slaps. I remember the theme song better than I remember the movie. So I don't know. It's just like a bit of a disappointment. I know that I can see why people would really like it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, the other
I feel the same way about Suzuki.
Yeah, it's just I kind of at this point know what I like with regards to like 60s and 70s Japanese cinema. So like going in and filling in some of those blind spots, like I already know that it's like not really going to be entirely what I'm looking for. But that's okay. The other film I watched in preparation for the 2021 list, because I know a few people on the server really liked it, but don't come for me. I just found it a little bit disappointing. It was Summit of the Gods, which is an animated film. It's French, but based on like a manga series or book. I think it's just maybe a book. I don't know, a series. And it's about like mountain climbers and Mount Everest and like trying to unravel like various mysteries and stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the animation is done pretty well. I thought it was pretty good visually. But it just felt like a little bit of a narrative disaster. I just found it really difficult to follow, which I felt like it shouldn't have been something that was difficult for me to follow. And it just, I was tonally a little bit confusing because I didn't quite know what emotions I was meant to be feeling in certain scenes or with certain plot developments. And so I just felt like it didn't communicate with me well and didn't quite tell me where it was going or what it was trying to do. It
Mm-hmm.
seemed like a lot more attention was put into visuals than it was into plot and narrative development. And I don't know if this is just like the adaptation from the book just didn't go that well or translate that well. Because it's based on something Japanese, but the movie is French, and like I don't speak French, so I think there may have been like language disconnects or just going through a lot of different iterations. I just it just wasn't something that I came away from very like impacted. It was
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Yeah, that's
feel a
okay.
whole lot. Yeah, I don't know. I know some people. I'm just trying to explain why it was okay. I can see that some people may have enjoyed it a lot more than I did, but it was a film that was like just okay. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry
nothing.
to Iggy.
Sorry to
Anyone who likes the
Iggy.
movie.
Yeah, there are a few people who like it. Sorry to all of you. Just like it, a little disappointing. So no bad movies, just some like disappointments. So
Yeah, that's not bad at all then.
mhm.
I watched some pretty terrible movies this month, unfortunately, but the two that really stuck out for me. So I started with this movie called Look Who's Talking from 1989, directed by Amy Heckerling. She directed Clueless, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, European Vacation, which I like those movies. Those are funny movies. But this was not funny to any degree, and it was kind of terrifying. This was like, it must have been like one of the biggest movie releases uh, of, I think, 89, that early, like the late 80s. It was a huge movie. It stars Kirstie Alley, John Travolta, and Bruce Willis, where Kirstie Alley is pregnant, but the twist of the movie is the baby can talk. No one else can understand the baby except for the audience. So the baby's talking to the audience during the film, and it's voiced by Bruce Willis, um, which I thought would be funny because why would Bruce Willis be a baby's voice, right? Like, haha, that's funny. But no, it was horrible and cringy. And John Travolta continues to be an actor that I do not understand. Like, I don't get him as a performer because he gives like Predator, like I'm gonna hurt you if you get near me kind of vibes in every role that he's in, and it's a lot in this movie.
Yeah, I assume that's the Scientology thing. He's like really
Right.
high up. He's like a really high up Scientologist. So that is probably why he gives off those vibes.
Yeah, it's he's very scary in this movie when he's supposed to be sweet, like he's supposed to be this nice, like, romantic lead, but he does things in this movie that are wrong and that no one should be doing. But he's like, oh, it's cool because I'm hot, but also I'm gonna hurt you, maybe, who knows. So that wasn't fun. That wasn't good.
It's hard to wrap my head around that being bad though. That sounds hilarious. The way you described
Right.
it sounds hilarious, but I'll take your word for it that it was really because I know that feeling when you click on something to watch and you're like, oh, this will be really funny. This will just be really
Right.
silly and stupid. And then you
It was
watch it and it's just
exciting.
boring. It's just boring as hell and really dumb. And you go, well,
Hmm.
that's time I'm never getting back. I've been
Yeah.
tricked.
Yeah, seriously. Well, it's funny because the beginning of the movie starts with sex, but like from the point of view of the sperm. So it's kind of like the Woody Allen movie, in that way, where they're all like going like, "Yay, we're gonna go impregnate that egg," and it's really funny. But it's the only funny scene in the movie, and it's at the very beginning, and they never do that again. So it's like, well, that was disappointing. But anyway, the other bad movie that I saw was Bullet Train, which came out this year, directed by David Leitch. He did Deadpool 2, Atomic Blonde. He's stunt coordinator mostly, though. And I kind of wish he would stay that way, because his movies have been really not my thing. And this movie was just a painful experience from minute one for me. Um, the cast is pretty sprawling. It's got so many famous people in it. It's got Brad Pitt, Joey King, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, Andrew Koji, like just so many people, and all of them play characters that are cliche and uninteresting and not funny. And what was shocking for me was that the action was bad, which I feel like, if you're a stunt coordinator making an action movie, this should be the one thing that's rock solid is the action, but it was not. It was really poorly cut and not my favorite thing. Oh, we got a lot of responses to that.
Well, I actually quite enjoy Bullet Train, but maybe it was changed because I went with a mate and we just had a great laugh watching it in the cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I remember, this is unrelated, but I remember we were there and there was a guy sitting there, so literally every single joke in the movie he would double over laughing at. Even if it wasn't even that funny, he was crying laughing at every single joke in the movie. So maybe he maybe like it more than it actually was. But no, I did quite enjoy it. I just thought it was a really fun time to have in the cinema.
Yeah, I'm a party pooper. I don't like movies like
Mm.
that. There's the story is kind of like about an assassin who's going to go do a job on a bullet train, and it just kind of spirals out into unfortunate actions throughout the movie. But like, there's this I don't know what it is. This is my party pooper opinion on this. Is that every time a Western movie shows Japan to some degree, and it's like a big budget thing, it always has to be like, oh, look at Japan. They have bright neon signs. They have fast trains. And oh, look, their toilets are strange and they talk to you. Whoa. I hate that so much. It's not really, I hate it.
No, I agree with you. And I find it interesting how even Japanese directors that then go into trying to appeal to Western markets, specifically like Sean Sono, will also do that. They'll sort of make fun of themselves and their own film industry and their own sort of culture as like, oh, we're Japan, we're so random. And it's very, very irritating.
Yeah, it's like put up to 11 in this movie. Like, that's all it is. They're just soaking the Japan culture train, and that's it for the most part. So that was frustrating. But hey, you know what? That's not my kind of movie, so everyone else can definitely enjoy that, I'm sure. If you like Deadpool 2 and stuff like that.
Yeah, I wanted to see that originally when I first saw it was coming out. And I still sort of want to see it, still sort of interested. But then I saw what he had also worked on and saw, oh, Deadpool 2 and Atomic Blonde. Those did not appeal to me. I did not like those. I think it's interesting, though, that you said that the action was really bad, because I remember the one thing about Atomic Blonde that I did like was the action sequences. I thought that they were sort of fun and well choreographed. But I also haven't seen that movie in a while, so maybe my memory's wrong.
No, I agree. I thought Atomic Blonde was... I didn't like the movie, but the action was good. And that's really the only reason to see that movie anyway. So that was missing for me in this one, which is too bad. But yeah, so that was the worst. Honestly, not a bad month from everybody, so good job. Let's talk about some unexpected picks, though. So, Matt, what were some unexpected movies that you saw this month?
Well, mine, it's not like the whole film. It's not like certain elements of them that surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one I'm going to say is Walker, which is about the mercenary William Walker, who invaded and made himself president of Nicaragua in the 19th century. And the big surprise for me was that a film this like insanely left wing managed to get through a major studio in the Reagan Cold War era. Like, it's so openly and brazenly leftist and anti-imperialist and critical of the USA. Like, I just cannot believe that this was approved by a major studio in the 1980s. I mean, it did. I mean, to be fair, it did end up destroying Alex Cox's career, but like, even it getting made in the first place, is just massively surprising to me.
Yeah, that's great.
And
I've seen his movie Sid and Nancy. That was that was an experience too.
And then the other movie I'm going to say was a bit of a surprise was Boiling Point, which is a one-shot movie about a night, like one night in a fancy London restaurant. I think the big surprise to me was just how much this film invokes. I'm going to plug him again because I know I've spent like half the Key Olympics podcast plugging him, but how much it invokes Alan Clark. Like if he hadn't died young and had lived until 2021, Boiling Point is the exact kind of film I think he'd be making. Like with this sort of harsh social realism in a sort of inventive structure and the isolated and disillusioned male characters. I think it's just really nice thing to see in a movie made in 2021. Was just this very. It felt like something he could have made.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet, but that's been on my list to like see from 2021.
Yeah, I wish it was part of the 2021 list. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
All right, how about you, Nicky? What was some unexpected stuff?
So I had a couple surprises, not huge ones, but worth mentioning. The first is Joe Carnahan being good and not just a meme. That was definitely a surprise. Another was the Dracula 1958 movie, directed by Terence Fisher with Christopher Lee as Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
I have been watching through vampire movies pretty chronologically from 1922 forwards in time. So I had seen like a lot of 30s and 40s riffs on Dracula 1931 by that point, by the time I got to the late 50s. So I was sort of expecting, right, it's going to be the same Dracula story I've seen over and over again, but in color and with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. And instead, in the first 20 minutes, it turns the entire mythos on its head by having one of the main characters from Dracula be presented in a completely different light and also die, like really at the beginning of the film. And so you go, oh, okay, this is not what I was expecting at all. And it turns into this sort of postmodern riff on the original story, which is interesting because this was 1958. Postmodernism was not really a big thing in art at that point. It didn't really gain relevancy until the 60s and 70s. I think the first postmodern novel, what is normally cited as the first postmodern novel, is Naked Lunch, which came out in 1959, a year later. So it's really interesting to see an example of a sort of postmodern story in the late 50s, that early. Yeah. So that was surprising to me.
That's great.
It's also a really good movie. So
yeah, I'm a huge fan of that Dracula Hammer series. It is so much fun, and they're all like well made. And also, Christopher Lee is he's the best Dracula for me.
He's so weird. He's such a weird Dracula. I think comparing him and Bela Lugosi is so interesting because Bela Lugosi is sort of this charming, suave, charismatic, but still like dangerous, like quite dangerous. Whereas Christopher Lee is just this madman. He's just this neurotic, crazy, skinny guy running around.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but also kind of terrifying in its own way.
Yeah,
so I've really enjoyed that.
His depiction of Dracula is definitely my favorites. And, Peter Cushing and him are they're so awesome together. They're great.
Peter Cushing's also brilliant. I watched Brides of Dracula the other day where there's no Christopher Lee, but it's Peter Cushing as the main character. And he's awesome. Yeah. He's so great.
He kills it in like everything he's in. He's awesome.
And then the last surprise, again, not a huge surprise, but enough, is I watched the Child's Play, the first Child's Play and the sequel. I'd never had any interest in watching Child's Play, even though it is one of those horror classics, because I just think the creepy dolls thing is really, really dumb. I think it's a stupid trope. It's not scary. So I wasn't ever planning on watching it, but then I went over to a friend's place. He really likes it. He's like, oh, we got to watch this. So I thought, all right, or sure, we'll humor you. And I actually ended up really liking them. I actually ended up thinking that they were quite good movies. There's some really great moments in those movies, a few that actually do come off as a bit creepy, even though I don't really find the dolls thing very creepy. And probably not the scenes that I think a lot of people point to in those movies as being creepy, because some people think, oh, even before the doll goes evil, it's just a creepy doll. And like it's weird looking, I guess, but I don't know. But there's definitely some moments in those movies that stand out as being worthy of that sort of cult status that the Child's Play
Right.
series has. I don't know if I'm going to watch all of them, maybe at some point, but I definitely enjoyed those first two.
Well, I think
Quite a bit.
they've made like what 8 Chucky movies now. I think.
They've made so many, yeah. There's like a series too, I think,
Oh
recently.
my gosh. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that character's never gonna die. It's gonna last
Never.
forever.
He can't die.
I like the beginning of the first Chucky, with the scene where they're in the toy store and he gets zapped and everything. I think that's so fun, like a fun way to start off your horror monster movie kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's so intense. It's such an intense opening.
Hmm.
I wasn't expecting that at all. I just thought, oh, it's creepy doll 80s movie, and it's just this like really maximalistic action scene with things exploding, and you're
Right.
like, oh, okay, that's not what I thought I was in for here, but that's exciting.
Because the rest of the movie isn't really like that necessarily,
No,
but it's
not
really
really at
fun.
all.
Well, yeah, that sounds great. How about you, Elena? What was some unexpected picks?
I think I had a pretty predictable month. I think most of my months are a little bit predictable. I just, one brief mention is in my 2021 watching, I did really enjoy After Yang, which is a film that I didn't really expect to enjoy so much.
Hmm.
I thought it had, I mean, it is kind of about the like what makes us human thing, but I thought that it had this other component of like grief and like cultural identity and a lot of other things interwoven into it that made it a very like emotionally impactful movie for me. So I did
Hmm.
enjoy that a lot more than I had expected because to me it was a lot more about like grief as a component of like humanity rather than like simply like what is being human.
Hmm.
So I did really quite like that. The well, a film that I kind of surprised myself by watching um was Peter Greenaway's Baby of Macon, maybe is how you pronounce it. Uh I'm sorry, I'm butchering pronunciation in every episode. I've seen this is my third Greenaway. Um, I don't know why I watched it. I had expected to be kind of similar to what I'd seen before, which is stuff that was quite shocking to me, but not as maybe intense as this one. I will preface that this film has a lot of like graphic sexual violence, so if you were like at all sensitive to that, I would definitely avoid this film. But it's like intensely overly theatrical and it's so like maximalist and decadent. Um, it was like a level of theatricality that I had like never really encountered in a film before, and it kind of blends what is like reality and what is theater, which I think
Hmm.
was really interesting with its thematic thematic focus, which is a lot about a critique of organized religion and the ways that people exploit religion for their own personal gain and how people believe in organized religion. It's a lot about all that. So I think that the whole theater thing works with the whole like organized religion being a sort of theater and act. So that was a super interesting way to approach that idea.
Hmm.
But it's just I thought that the cook, the thief, his wife and her lover was rough. This one is beyond that. So it was something that I surprised myself by watching because it was a tough watch to get through, but I think overall rewarding and how it approaches its goals through its medium, and I really quite
Hmm.
um, I think it was good that I saw it for that whole thing. So I think that was probably my most
Would you say you're a
surprising
fan?
of Greenaway.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Greenaway works against a lot of the things that I generally like, but I'm fascinated by Greenaway. I think Greenaway is something that on paper I don't like, but I keep being intrigued. So I keep watching
Hmm.
because I think that he pushes the medium in ways that I don't expect.
Yeah,
So
he does.
I haven't loved any of his films yet, but I am intrigued. So
Yeah,
I'm glad that I saw it.
he's a
It was
very interesting director. He
it's a very interesting director, and um, I don't know. I always come away from his films being a bit shocked or traumatized.
Yeah,
But they
that
always,
sounds about
yep,
right.
yeah. But they always like push my understanding of what cinema can be, and yeah, just really strong premise behind this one. Very interesting film.
Yeah, Cook Thief was the first. No, actually, I think Jocelyn's Contract was the first one I watched. But, anyways, I remember the first time I watched Cook Thief, and that ending happened,
Mhm.
and the movie was over, and I was just sat there like, what the hell did I just
Yeah.
watch? That's
Yes.
amazing. It's an
Yeah.
amazing film, and it's beautifully, beautifully made.
Hmm.
The costume design, the sets, the lighting, just everything is gorgeous.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot. Uh, that movie that you mentioned, Baby of Macon, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it might be French. It looks like Baby of Macon, but I think I don't know. Someone's gonna come
Yeah,
for me on pronunciation again.
Macon,
Macron.
Macon, Macon. Yeah, that sounded familiar, and then when I went to go look at it, it is the one I was thinking of where everybody has just been like, yeah, 4.5, 5 star. This is amazing, but oh my god, is it
It's
disgusting?
gross.
It's just horrific. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna watch
Yeah.
that. Grunaway's great though, yeah.
Awesome. Um, well, for me, I had two pretty interesting picks. I'll start with one called The Yakuza. It's directed by Sidney Pollack from 1974. It stars Robert Meacham, Ken Takakura, Keiko Kishi. It's written by Paul Schrader. So I don't know why I was surprised I wasn't gonna like this because it's got a lot of people in it that I do like, but it just kind of the title is so bad, in my opinion. Like the movie called The Yakuza, like oh great, okay, another one of those crappy Japan movies that I was just talking about, but it's not. Sidney Pollack continues to be just one of the best directors I've ever seen. All of his movies are expertly made, and the scripts are always so tight. And the Yakuza was no different. Robert Meacham, I always kind of attach him to westerns, and like he's kind of like a big baby in a lot of his roles. He doesn't really emote necessarily. He just kind of is like a man child who's big and like stoic for some reason. But in this movie, he's very much out of his comfort zone. He's in Japan. He speaks Japanese fairly well, which was really weird to see. I would never expect to see Robert Meacham speaking Japanese, but he does, and he does a good job. So good job for him. But the movie was super, super interesting, and I was just shocked by how good it was. It's gorgeously made. The lighting, in particular, was shocking, and just how expertly done it was. So if you're looking for something like that's, it's not an action movie until like the last 15 minutes or so. It's a lot of intrigue and building up all this mystery because it's about this guy who goes back to Japan to help an old friend out. Um, and they get into Yakuza stuff, as the title hints. But yeah, it was really great. Definitely suggest Sidney Pollack's films overall, like to everybody. Like Tootsie is awesome. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Is fantastic. So he's got a lot of really good films. The other unexpected movie that I saw is a movie called Cloak and Dagger from 1984, directed by Richard Franklin. So this is a kids movie from the early 80s, which I was not born in the 80s, so I don't have this nostalgia for the 80s. So these kind of movies are usually not my thing, but this movie was awesome, and I was totally surprised by how awesome this kids film could be. It's about this little boy who has a very active imagination about spies and going on missions and video games and all this stuff. Um, but it turns out he accidentally goes into a real spy mission investigation and gets all tumbled into it. And it's surprisingly violent for a kids' film, like really violent. and dangerous. Like he gets shot at multiple times. He shoots people, like the main kid, and it's all very serious. It's supposed to be like tongue in cheek, but it's very serious. But he's doing throughout the film. Um, it stars the kid from E.T., Henry Thomas. So it's kind of fun to see him do this. And some of the other characters are played by John McIntyre, who's like you might know him from Psycho or Wagon Train. So he's kind of like a storied actor. So it's fun to see him in this. And also, Jeanette Nolan is in this movie too, and she plays Lady Macbeth from the Orson Welles Macbeth. So she's always a rock star. But this movie was super fun, super violent, and they just did a nice new remaster for it. So definitely suggest if you're looking for something weird from the early '80s. But yeah, so those are my unexpected picks. So I think overall it was a good month for me. I wasn't disappointed. Did you guys all have a good month overall for films?
Yeah, it was a pretty good month. Hopefully, I won't have any bad films next month, but
That's the hope.
Not
that's
gonna happen.
Yeah.
reach for the stars, I guess,
Yeah.
or reach for the moon, whichever one it is.
There you go.
I think my month was a little bit on the predictable side. Like I knew what I was getting into, but I do think that my little 40s binge has gotten me out of my box a little bit, and also watching some more recent films was pretty good. So I am happy with that.
I think that's the trade-off, right? Is that if you have a really good month, that's usually because you know you don't really go so much out of your comfort zone. You're picking things you know you're going to
Yeah,
like,
true.
Yeah.
but that means you're also not as likely to be surprised.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unless anyone has anything left to say, I think that's it. So thanks for coming on and talking about your movies.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, like, subscribe, follow. We're on all the big platforms. So look on Spotify, Apple, Google, YouTube, the whole thing. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Bye.
Peace.